Toto Wolff has opened up on the latest drama surrounding Red Bull, as he is not convinced that the device to raise and lower the ride height has not been used by the team and is inaccessible after the car has been assembled. The Austrian feels like harsher penalties and investigations should be applied to Red Bull, and that the FIA didn't really understand this situation as seriously as they should have. But with all this in mind, can the governing body do something after the pressure has increased from teams like Ferrari and McLaren as well? And if so, will it be able to prove that the ride height altering device has been used in the past? Toto Wolff is one of the greatest nemesis of Red Bull, even though the rivalry has kind of died on the track from 2022 onwards due to the lack of understanding that Mercedes has shown towards the ground floor era. Be that as it may, that didn't deprive Wolff of commenting about certain situations that have aggravated him way more than they should have. And the last one is the ride height device that Red Bull have been accused of using under parc fermé conditions. According to the FIA, there is nothing wrong with this device because there is technically no way that it can be accessed when the car is assembled, as they've sent technicians to look into this more thoroughly during the Austrian GP, where everything seemed to be perfectly fine with the legality of the car. But in a sport where every gram of weight matters, having a device that is not used from the team, practically labelling it as useless, makes zero to no sense. And this is why Wolff believes that there is something that the FIA hasn't done properly, and that is conduct thorough research and find evidence as to whether or not it has been used in the previous races, which of course is a lot easier said than done. When talking about it though, to a greater extent, Wolff said, "My view is, from the distance of what I've seen and what I've heard, it's outrageous. I think we are all designing parts that are F1 standard and that are to the highest specifications that are within the regulations. Sometimes on things like aeroelasticity, you would probably try to go as far as you can, but there are other things overall and certain parts where you would question why they exist. Why would you design such a thing and put two marks on it for two positions? Is that the precise decision making in F1? This is definitely a question that has been asked by many F1 experts, because the way that Red Bull have explained the existence of this part looked like it's quite useless, to say the least, as it can only be used before the car is assembled. Therefore, it adds more weight to the car, an issue that they've been quite vocal about having on both of the RB20s, and it also makes it more challenging to tackle it down, as they've chosen to strip the paint of the car in order to save weight rather than get this device out, which would have granted them a lighter car to drive with. And of course, it's Red Bull we're talking about. While they're known for dominating the sport in the past couple of years on sheer performance, winning 21 out of 22 races in 2023, this is the team that has also been found in breach of the budget cap in 2021, as they've received a sporting penalty as well as a €7 million fine to pay to the sport directly. We've seen how much the sporting penalty is hurting them right now, and while it's safe to assume that Verstappen will win the championship if nothing outrageous happens in the remainder of the 5 races and 2 sprint events, the team is definitely not entering as a favourite to win it all in 2025. Wolff hasn't stopped with the criticism here, and when talking about it to a greater extent, the Austrian hasn't been convinced that what Red Bull are doing should pass the tests and the regulations that are the same for every other team out there. Furthermore, the team principal of Mercedes said, "I think the leadership of the FIA is going to look at the device and say, what are we doing with this? I really like that when they put this real broom in the car to demonstrate that that is the only way of that getting changed. I wonder how long it took them to make this up and to stick it in there." And as I mentioned earlier in this video, Zak Brown is also not convinced that there is nothing wrong with this device from Red Bull. He is confident that the governing body is going to look at it properly and get on top of things sooner rather than later. But nevertheless, the CEO of McLaren is adamant that this is yet another way for Red Bull to try and exploit the rulebook to the extent that it's considered genius and yet borderline legal. When talking about it, Brown said, "I'm comfortable the FIA are on top of the issue. I'm comfortable that the FIA have discovered an issue or a potential issue and they've rectified it moving forward. I do have some concerns over what maybe has or hasn't happened historically, but that's kind of more where our concerns and questions are. It's an open source component, so you can look at what all the teams are doing. It's published, and it's the only team from what we can see that has the ability to make modifications from inside the cockpit. So some things don't quite stack up in the sense of it. If you can adjust it in parc ferme and after, why put a seal on it if it's already effectively sealed? The issue that opened up here is not about Red Bull having the device, but using it to alter the ride height throughout sessions. For example, they would have one ride height in qualifying because the car is lighter as it's loaded with less fuel, and another ride height throughout the race when it's preloaded with fuel that should last the entire race. Obviously, this cannot be proven, and as it all stands, it's just a rumor circulating from the top executives in the sport, and it's already known that they are going to try and throw shades at Red Bull as much as possible now that the downfall of the Austrian team has seemingly slowed down after the Austin GP's upgrades. This is an issue that Zak Brown sees as the biggest one with the entire saga, and when explaining what's bothering him the most, the chief of McLaren said, "Typically, being able to run a car lower is a competitive advantage. It makes the car quicker most of the time. The FIA, who I think have done a very good job of identifying an element from a single race team, from what we can see, from having looked at all the open source components, Red Bull is the only team that has the ability to adjust the ride height from inside the cockpit. Whether they have or haven't, I have no idea, but having the ability to do so raises questions. It's very clear in the regulations, and it's a material breach that if you modify your race car, anything that you didn't get permission on or driver comfort is very much against regulations. So Red Bull have decided, from what I've read, to put a seal on it. But this is where Horner believes that the rivals of Red Bull are trying to stir up drama where drama doesn't exist. And obviously it's going to be tough for him to prove it, because whenever something suspicious happens between Red Bull and the legality of the sport, an agreement comes with the FIA. Truth be told, a similar thing can be said for McLaren as well, because they've been exploiting a mini DRS trick on their rear wing before it was finally brought to light in Baku. But now we've seen that they're struggling with the top speed of the car, at least they did in Austin. And obviously the clampdown of the FIA has done its job, despite the car being set with a higher downforce and therefore having a top speed was not really the priority for both of the MCL 38s. Horner has scrutinised the rivals who are trying to win these battles off the track, and when talking about the accusations, the Brit said the adjuster is on a list of the open source components, so it's been publicly available for the last 3 years. The FIA is happy with it. I think it's just to satisfy perhaps some paranoia elsewhere in the paddock. With all this in mind, do you think that the device has truly been used by Red Bull? And if so, do you think that the FIA has what it takes in order to go back in time and see whether the Austrian team has been reaping the benefits of this grey area? Let us know in the comments below, and if you're interested in the latest development of Lawson's case to get Perez's seat from 2025 onwards, make sure to check out the video that's appearing on your screen right now.